Now let's talk about the next session in this first division, that is from 1939 to 1956. This is about the literary overview in module 3. We finished module 1 and module 2. Now we are talking about whatever is relevant in module 3 that applies to this time period. So yeah, 1950s was the time that there was a difference between the film culture, the British film scene, and the literature scene, because British films always glorified war. I told you how they glorified always, even during the First World War also. Through films, they always tried to make people aware of whatever is happening in the battlefield. I told you about the trench war scene during the First World War, how they had this movie and everything. So in Second World War also, British films always glorified the war, the courageous, the heroism in it and everything. And but literature, it started becoming gloomy. Of course, there were war poets like the First World War. So the example, the war poets of Second World War was this time Keith Douglas, okay, Alan Lewis and Sidney Case. You have to know at least one example from the Second World War poets, and I have chosen here the poem, his Keith Douglas poem. It is the title is a bit difficult to pronounce, but I'll try my best. It is called Vergis Meiniched. Vergis Meiniched. Vergissmeiniccht. Don't worry, just study the spelling by heart and just put that as an example if you can for the exam. That's more than enough. But let me at least tell you something about this poem. First, it's just a small poem, so let me read this poem, at least a few stanzas in the beginning, and then you'll get the idea whether it is a pleasant portrait of the battle or it is something realistic. 3 weeks gone and the combatants gone, returning over the nightmare ground, we found the place again and found the soldiers sprawling in the sun. So there is a dead body of a soldier. So the poet is talking about this dead body, this decaying dead body out in the open. He's not even buried. He's just lying there in the battlefield and started decaying also. Actually, some lines are really disturbing, because you see, for example, third stanza, it goes like this. We see him almost with content, abased and seeming to have paid and mocked at by his own equipment. That's hard and good when he is decayed. But she would weep to see today how on his skin the swart flies move, the dust upon the paper eye, and the burst stomach like a cave. So there is this full picture of a decaying dead body with the stomach burst open. You know that when the dead body decays, stomach always burst open, right? So see, it's a very I shouldn't say disgusting, but it is a disturbing picture. It's a realistic picture. It's a reality. It's a harsh reality of Second World War. So when British films glorified or tried to putty on the atrocities of World War, you have these war poets, like in the First World War. They tried to bring the realistic pictures, the truth in front of the readers there. So that is something you should know about the literature at that time. Now, another literary work to be mentioned here is Evelyn Waugh's Sword of Honor trilogy. Now, Sword of Honor trilogy is not very, what should I say, it's not there in the canon, or it's not as popular as other classic texts, but you must remember this example, Evelyn Waugh's Sword of Honor trilogy, and this was published in 1952, 55 and 61. So if you want to know something about it, a bit of details are given there in the notes. Please go to that, and with that, a little bit of understanding about literature is more than enough. Now let's talk about realism, modernism and postmodernism during the 1950s. What is realism actually? Realism is it's a way of writing or portraying anything in art, representing anything. It can be in films, it can be in paintings, music, music, to some extent, architecture, and of course writing as well, poetry, novel, anything. Realism is as the name indicates, it's showing the reality. No more fantasy, it's showing the reality. In layman's terms, it is showing the reality. You'll understand if I talk about films, realistic films. Realistic films try to keep the same soundtrack the camera captures or the camera records at the time of shooting. The realistic soundtrack, there won't be much of a background music, and even regular scenes like a man walking, or a breakfast scene in a movie in the morning in a kitchen. Everything is shown with the reality. Now, just to give you an example, I can put it in the WhatsApp group, some examples with some scenes cut from the films, or I can also send you to tell you the differences between realism and modernism and postmodernism through paintings that I can do in WhatsApp group. Don't worry about it, because if you see these pictures, at least you will understand the differences between realism and then modernism, postmodernism. I'll tell you about painting. Realism in painting, how different is that? Have you seen pictures that are mistaken as photographs, that looks exactly like a photo is taken? So realistic. That is realism in painting. And see, some landscapes, painters paint landscapes, beautiful landscapes, realism, because they don't distort anything. They just portray the reality as it is. Sometimes a wedding scene, the wedding scene with all its ugliness, with the reality it is portrayed in the painting. Then comes to modernism, Picasso's painting. They alter. For example, the shape of a woman may not be, the face of a woman may not be like a real face, but slight of a little bit of an angle there, and the nose shape will be a little bit of a square instead of the round. But you will understand that it is a person there, it is a woman there. That is modernist painting. I'll give the examples in the WhatsApp group. When you see it, you will understand. Coming to postmodernism paintings. Postmodernism paintings are those paintings, sometimes when you go to galleries to see paintings, sometimes we all say, oh, these paintings, we can also paint like this. You don't need a special coaching or training. You don't have to go to a painting school to paint like this. My 3-year-old son can draw like this. See, I used to think that sometimes, seeing the postmodern paintings, but what I never knew was, in order to paint like that, in order to bring a lot of meaning and representation into that kind of painting, you need to have tremendous experience in the foundation of painting. Right? You can't just draw something or sketch something with a pencil and call it postmodernist painting. Well, you can if you have got that much of an idea, that much of a capacity with you or talent with you, but otherwise it is not as simple as it looks. So that is the differences between realism in painting, modernism in painting, postmodernism in painting. Because realism, it tries to portray things as it is. Modernism tries to alter the reality by bringing something extra, by distorting it, by, for example, if you in a novel, the novel may not be in the same order as the time, but the novel would go forth and back in time. There may not be a chronological order with the time. But when it comes to postmodernism, for example, Salman Rushdie's Midnight's Children is a postmodern novel. When you read the novel, you actually get confused because there is magical realism in it. There are things that don't happen in usual regular day-to-day life. There is magic in it, there is realism in it, and sometimes the narrator himself is talking to himself, is talking to you, addressing you, directly addressing you. And breaking the fourth wall, like in film, when we say breaking the fourth wall, like that narrator speaks to you, and actually there is actually an experiment with the whole narrative technique in the novel, and you don't even understand the whole structure. It takes an effort to understand. For a regular person like you and me, takes an effort to understand. So it's an example of postmodernism. So I think you get some idea about the realism, modernism and postmodernism. Now let's talk about these isms that happened in the 50s and what are the influences of changes. So let's talk about realism. See, the turn to realism in literature in the 50s seemed to be the dominant trend, but it is important to recognize that modernist aesthetics were not rejected wholesale in post-war writing. Earlier I told you that there was a hostility towards modernism because modernism was associated with upper class people. the upper class rich people who were who had a lot of time to write and worry about all this art and everything, because they had a lot of money and comfortable life. Working class never cared about it, because after the war, when what happened was they were struggling to live, they had to start new families, and working class was coming upwards. They were climbing the social ladder, financially they were becoming rich. So suddenly there was a hostility towards the upper class and whatever was associated with the upper class. So modernism, usually associated with the upper class, was hated by this majority of the working class. So that is why there was a hostility towards modernism during the 50s. So that is something you should know about modernism. The writers who were influenced by the First World War writers found themselves repeating the same despairing reaction to war, because see, it was like during the First World War, you have after war poetry talking about the struggles of human life and everything, and then in between you have modernism coming, and then again another war coming. Now modernism had actually brought some kind of positivity towards people's mind, a kind of focus on back in literature and entertainment. But everything went to waste with the Second World War. People lost faith in all this modernism and its philosophy. And it was as if modernism never happened. 1950s writers and the readers pretended like modernism never happened at all. They didn't want to think about it because for them it was all useless. See, exactly, that's why. It was all useless. The obsession with the techniques, the obsession with the dynamics of time and everything, the new narrative techniques, the new style in poetry, everything went to waste with the Second World War. So that is why. So there was a hostility towards upper class people. This was partly because of the anti-class feeling in the 50s Britain scenario, I told you. And the critique of modernism by young British writers in the 50s appeared to be based on this conception of modernism as escapist, elitist, and obscure, and therefore antithetical to the democratic and populist values of the post-war social consensus. So modernism was found as escapist, elitist, and obscure. Escapist means escaping from the reality of the world. If you see Virginia Woolf's fiction, yes, it has nothing to, yes, there are things about war, it is there, but other works also you can see that it is not talking about whatever is happening around you. They're talking about something very hi-fi, very highbrow, or only people from the upper class can understand. Only people with the time can understand. So it was seen as elitist and irrelevant and obscure by the readers of the 50s. So obviously there was a hostility and modernism declined. So that is why you have postmodernism. So when something declines, you have another ism coming. So then postmodernism, how it happened? Precisely what constitutes postmodern literature is notoriously difficult to define. Okay, postmodernism is difficult to define, right? But somehow we'll try to define it. It is habitually associated with the stylistic characteristics such as self-reflexivity, parody, pastiche, and metafiction, and with epistemological claims that reality is preceded by and dependent on language, and that we can only know the real through its textual traces. It may be possible, for example, to describe the work of Harold Pinter, perhaps Britain's most significant post-war dramatist, Harold Pinter, as postmodern, in the sense that his plays consistently highlight the ways in which language conceals truth. Harold Pinter's Birthday Party is a typical example for postmodernist play, postmodernism in drama, in English theatre. Birthday Party is a very disturbing play. It's about this, the protagonist's name is Stanley Weber, and he lives with Meg and P.T. Bowles. These are the important characters. You have Stanley Weber, you have P.T. Bowles and Meg Bowles. So these are important characters, and you have Lulu, another character, and Goldberg and McCann. These are the only 6 characters coming in Birthday Party. I want you to go and check the summary of Birthday Party. It is, yeah, it's some sort of an absurd play. It is also, comedy of menace and black humor and everything. You don't understand. See, all through the play, you have no idea. I'll give you a gist here. you have no idea why Stanley Weber, the protagonist of the play, is being pursued by these two people, Goldberg and McCann. These are the two people. They're coming in as some sort of agents of some sort of maybe detectives or agents of police. We don't know because the play doesn't reveal it. But you know that Stanley Weber is being pursued by these people. We don't know what did he do in order to be pursued by these people. So this is a mystery. The mystery remains unsolved until the end. And you have some sort of complicated relationship between this Meg Pauls and Stanley Weber. You see some sort of flirtations and her husband is okay with that. You have no idea what is happening because Stanley Weber is staying there like a paying guest. And this is the house lady we are talking about. And Meg and P.T. Bowles, these are the two people, they are the owners of the house. And when this wife flirts with this Stanley Weber, nobody seems to have any problem with that. She just does that out in the open. And there is also an attempt to rape this girl, Lulu. And it's really, we have no idea what is happening, whether the rape happened there or was it only an attempt, or what was the reason for that, because it was all happening all on a sudden. And if I tell you here, it doesn't make any sense. You have to either watch the play in the YouTube, there might be plays there in the YouTube, or you have to at least read the summary of the play. I want you to do that because then you will understand what is modernism play or postmodernism play in English theatre at that time. I also told you about the 1950s hostility towards the upper class people. As a result, in literature, there was also this movement called the movement poets. The movement poets were also part of the angry young man movement. See, angry young man movement. They were young men who were really angry at the upper caste people. So, sorry, upper class people, not the caste. Caste, when you talk about caste, it is in India. This is class because it is West. So yeah, there was a hostility towards upper class people, and so these young men, these writers, see for example poets like Philip Larkin, Kingsley Amis, Elizabeth Jennings, Tom Gunn, John Wayne, D.J. Enright, Robert Conquest. These are the poets who belong to movement poetry at that time. And also there was this, I told you, angry young men movement. How these young men were really angry at the establishment. They were really angry because of the unemployment. Of course, there was this welfare state phase was going on at that time. Clement Attlee was giving away all this money through ration and housing allowances to people, but people really faced that unemployment because they knew that Britain was sinking. The last attempt of the Labour Party was the 1951 exhibition. It is known as the 1951, let me tell you, yeah, celebrated the Festival of Britain 1951. I'll give the link down below in the description box and you can watch what happened in 1951 exhibition. Please watch that documentary and video and you will get the idea what happens, because 1951 Festival of Britain that happened in London at that time on the banks of Thames, it tried to portray the great British ideas, the British art, the British scientific innovations and architecture, everything only British. So it was an attempt for Britain to show off in front of the world what we are. Look at us, we are really great. It was like telling others, look how good we are. So it was actually the 100 year the centennial anniversary of the 1851 exhibition, the Great Exhibition. But unlike the Great Exhibition, see, Great Exhibition had art and architecture and other things from all other cultures. But 1951 festival, the Festival of Britain, was always only about British culture, British art and British representation. So you must understand how desperate Britain must have been in order to have this showpiece festival, in order to show people, to remind people, look at us, we are really great, we are doing okay, we are doing all right. But yes, Labour government was so desperate to cement that idea of success and peace after World War II. Now let's talk quickly about British literature in the 50s. This is not there in the syllabus in detail in Poplovsky, but I have taken this information from a website. This will help you to have a general understanding about British literature in the 50s. Let's talk about poetry quickly. The two famous poets were Philip Larkin and Ted Hughes. And Ted Hughes and Larkin, they used animal imagery in their poem. In their poetry. That's something that you should remember. One of Larkin's better known collections of poems was the Whitson Weddings. Within this collection, his poem The Whitson Weddings remains one of his more famous poems. It's one of the three poems about his train journeys. Hughes' first book of poetry, The Hawk in the Rain, was dedicated to his wife Sylvia Plath. Yeah, that is more than enough. Then you have Angry Young Men movement I told you about. Let's talk about the playwrights, the famous playwrights in the 50s. John Osborne, his play Look Back in Anger. This is specifically about Angry Young Men movement. Then you have Arnold Wesker. Arnold Wesker is known for the kitchen sink drama. His drama Roots 1959 it addresses the social concerns of the time. Arnold Wesker is always associated with the kitchen sink drama. Remember, kitchen sink drama and Arnold Wesker. And who else? Harold Pinter, yeah, we already discussed Birthday Party. Tom Stoppard, his play Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. These are characters from Shakespeare's Hamlet. He has named his play after these two characters from Hamlet. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. Then you have Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot. Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot is a wonderful play. It's an absurd play. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense if you look for a normal narrative pattern. It is not there. There is no normal plot there. But I'll give the link down below in the description box of Waiting for Godot. There is a play in YouTube. Please watch that. It's beautiful. It has that that meaninglessness of life, waiting for nothing. Practically they are waiting. There is no Godot coming. There is no Godot appearing in that play. But these two people are waiting for Godot, and the helplessness and the dry condition of life, waiting for almost an absent concept. And it shows the futility of human life. Actually, I don't know even how to explain, because I'm nobody to explain or to comment on this play, because it's a masterpiece. You have to watch that play. Please watch the play. I'll give the link down below and you will understand what I'm talking about. So then again, yeah, you have Kingsley Amis play, novels, Lucky Jim. Lucky Jim is probably his most famous and follows the character Jim Dixon. Then who else? You have Animal Farm by George Orwell. It's an important novel, Animal Farm, 1945 novel. It's a novel actually. It's a small novel actually, very small. And you have another text that is, you have to study this in the next module, 1984. We will study this in detail. Don't worry about this, but always remember these important texts. Then coming Lord of the Flies. This is a personal favorite of mine, Lord of the Flies. William Golding's novel Lord of the Flies is about a group of boys. They are trapped in an island. You have to read that. If you can, please read the novel. And there is this pseudo government is forming, because in an island where no human beings are found, these boys have to make a system in order to have that civilized living. So they are trying to imitate their elders. And it's actually allegorical of the British society, I would say. These boys are trying to be the good guys and the bad. There are rebels in another side, and there is this very scary scene in the novel where this I forgot the name of that person. I think it was is it Jim? I don't know. I don't remember the name. But this boy is hiding behind the bushes, and it is night. And the people, the one who is governing the island, the boy and his helpers are looking for this boy. And it's pinch dark, and he can actually see that the people who are searching for him, they're right in front of him, looking right at his eyes. But because it is darkness, they can't see him, but he can see them. He can see them, but they can't see him. So they're just looking through the bushes, and he can actually see the people looking right inches away from his face. And you have to put yourself in the shoes of that boy and think, imagine you are hiding under the bushes because you don't want to be caught by these people, and the people are searching for you and in the night, and they have the torchlights and everything, and they look for you, and while they look for you in the bushes, they're actually passing the bush under which you are hiding, and they accidentally, without knowing that you are there, they look right at your eyes, and you lose a heartbeat out of fear. So this is one incident I always remember when I read this novel, Lord of the Flies. It's a classic, if you can read it, wonderful novel, I'll tell you. Then again, post-colonial writing also appeared in the 1950s. We are just quickly talking about whatever happened in the literature field in the 50s. You have Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart, classic again, if you can read it, and if you're seriously thinking about MA in English, you must read this novel. Then Wide Sargasso Sea, Jean Rice, okay, not Jean, Jean Rice novel Wide Sargasso Sea. Now Wide Sargasso Sea is about the novel Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre's prequel, I would say. It is talking about Jane Eyre, it is talking about Jane Eyre and Rochester, and Rochester's mad wife, Bertha. Bertha. And this is talking about whatever happened to Bertha. Why she appears mad. So Wide Sargasso Sea is a post-colonial description. It's an explanation from the other, with the O capital, from the other. Whatever happened to this woman called Bertha? Why is she locked down in this room? Why is she portrayed as a mad woman? Is it because she is not English? So there is this the portrayal of other as anything abnormal is a regular scene. You can always see in the post-colonial fiction. Then Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis in children's fiction also happened in the 50s. Very popular children's fiction, Chronicles of Narnia. You have a movie also. So these are the general scene, general things that happen in the literature scenario in the 50s. Now we'll talk about the decline of English literature in the 50s. So there was a decline in the English literature in the 50s. Now, apart from everything what we have just listened to, we have got all the classics in the 50s. Whatever happened to the 50s literature? Why there is a decline in literature? Why do we say there was a decline in literature? See, all these classics appeared in 50s. Yes, I agree. But there could have been more. There could have been more books, more poetry, more fiction, more theatre plays. But what happened? See, Donald Davy, remember the name, Donald Davy, he published a book in 1952. The book's name is Purity of Diction in English Verse. Purity of Diction in English Verse. So this was published in 1952. And what did he say in this book? Let's see. He celebrated neoclassical form of Augustan poetry over the excesses of Romanticism and Modernism. So, in a nutshell, he was against the experimental writing. See, modernism was an experiment. See, until then a novel was written like what? Okay, once upon a time, there was a princess or there was a prince. Her father was a great king, and the story begins. Towards the middle you have a problem, you have a confrontation, and then towards the end you have a solution to that problem, and you have climax. So this is the narrative technique, right? There is a narrative order. So, but modernism experimented with this order. It shifted this order. So, for example, a modernist novel would be talking about whatever happened after the climax. First, when you start reading the novel, they would be talking about whatever happened in the first. So, for example, Virginia Woolf's novel, Mrs. Dalloway. Mrs. Dalloway is talking about this old woman, Mrs. Dalloway. She's remembering things from her life. She is now recovering from sickness, and she's thinking about her youth, her young days, and how she fell in love with Peter Walsh. I think his name is Peter Walsh, a very spontaneous and a very lively fellow, Peter Walsh. But he was a good boyfriend, a lively boyfriend, somebody like Shah Rukh Khan in the Bollywood. But he was not a good husband material, because husband material, for that you need a serious fellow with good money, with a work ethic, who can actually have a little bit of a steady life. There should not be any inconsistencies. So when she met Mr. Dalloway, she immediately falls in love with Dalloway, because Dalloway was everything that she was looking for in a husband. But Peter was not somebody who was a husband material. So, but she doesn't think, see, the novel doesn't go like this. For example, the novel starts with the young days of Mrs. Dalloway, how she was a young girl, how she has this love affair with Peter Walsh, and while being in love with Peter Walsh, she is also falling for Dalloway, and then again she gets old, and Dalloway also getting old, and they have a peaceful life. And then when she is in her 60s, I think Peter Walsh visits her. He is still unmarried, and they have a nice conversation, and they attend a party together. See, this is the natural order of life. But modernist novel, it talks about the present, the old age Mrs. Dalloway, and the scenes that she sees outside the window of a flower shop, and how she is terrified with the sight of a man who is traumatized after the war. And this is a modern fiction. This is experimental fiction. See, Donald Davy was against all these experiments. He thought it was this modernism, this romanticism, too much sentimentality. He was against all that. All he was celebrated was the Augustan poetry and its directness. So that is why we say that 50s there was a decline in English literature. So this is what you should remember. And also please read the paragraph I gave you under the title Decline of English Literature. Then you're good to go.